Welcome to the Fogi's Hub podcast. The Fogi's Hub is your go-to resource for learning everything about the Fogo chain. We're here to educate, inform, and connect. Whether you're getting started or exploring deeper, the Fogi's Hub is your trusted gateway to Fogo chain and the Fogo chain ecosystem. We're really excited to have Robinson Burkey on the call today, who is the co-founder of Wormhole. Before we dive into the incredible infrastructure he has built, let's acknowledge some impressive milestones. Wormhole currently enables over 200 applications across more than 40 blockchain ecosystems. And since 2020, the platform has facilitated over $68 billion in cross-chain volume through more than 1 billion messages. So welcome, Robinson, and how are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Seb and Dan. I'm doing really well. I'm excited to be on and chat all things Fogo and Wormhole.
We're very excited. And Dan's done a whole lot of research, and I've done a lot of research as well. And there's so many questions we'd like to get through. But I guess to start off with, like, we're trying to pack a whole lot of information into this little podcast. To start with, a little bit of background on you, because we believe a lot of the success of a project is tied to its founder and its co-founders. So can you tell a little bit about your trajectory before jumping into the crypto market?
Absolutely. I'll try to be brief. I'm kind of known as being a little bit long-winded sometimes, but I have been for over a decade working specifically within very small early stage startups. And that's been by design. I've always wanted to kind of have a bigger impact, whether it's on the growth, the product, engineering, et cetera. So I actually made my way out to Silicon Valley back in about 2014, 2015. Started working for various startups there. Some were successful. I exited or had good exits, some failed. I eventually made my way to DoorDash. I was there for a number of different years, helping run the new verticals business, which was fun, right? We got to try a lot of different products under this kind of umbrella of safety, if you will, right? You have the core business and then trying a bunch of different things, whether it was coffee or corporate ordering like catering. We got to almost be a startup within a much bigger and safer startup. And actually, funny enough, just before I went to DoorDash, and this was still kind of in Silicon Valley in like the 2017, 2018, I had gotten into crypto personally. So I actually in 2013, I got my first experience buying fake IDs via this website. I think it was ID Chief or something. You use Bitcoin to buy it back then. Probably if you looked at the amount of Bitcoin I use, it would be like insane at this point in terms of price. But I started to really get into crypto in about 2017. Back then, Ethereum was proof of work. I started running miners. But at the time I was at DoorDash, it was very much so and still is a rocket ship of sorts. So I stayed there and I didn't make the leap until post IPO of DoorDash. I ended up making my way to Jump crypto. At the time, Jump was very much so kind of the center brain trust for crypto talent. And that's actually where Wormhole was born. So we incubated Wormhole at Jump. We have a very much so a high frequency trading institutional type background, which has led to some of our success today. Once we got big enough, or once Wormhole got big enough, we ended up spinning it out to the foundation and labs. And we've been that for about 2.5 years now. So hopefully that's provides some context and, obviously can talk a little bit more about Wormhole and how things spun out and whatnot.
Yeah, pretty impressive indeed. Yeah. I'm sure you didn't spend like the 10,000 Bitcoin on a pizza, but on those IDs.
One of these days, I want to figure out a way if I could go back and like maybe ChatGPT knows how much ID Chief charge for an ID or so. I can figure it out later, but maybe I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to know how much it would have been worth.
Yeah, $500,000 ID just to, I don't know, get into some clubs early or whatever it is you wanted to do.
For sure. But yeah, you were pretty early. And on your journey to crypto markets, yeah, you did mention Jump Crypto. So you guys also like share a DNA with other foundational projects like Pyth Network, Firedancer.
Yep.
What would you say is like the secret sauce at the Jump for projects to be successful?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think what Jump did a really good job of was hiring really good talent. And I think there's like a number of maybe ways you can look or judge good talent. Of course, there's like smart individuals, right? But I think that one of the kind of intangible things that you felt there was this almost like relentless execution oriented mindset. And the other caveat I will say is on like 3, 6, 12-month time horizons. I think what's interesting about crypto is that so much of the conversation happens on crypto Twitter, which I don't think is a bad thing. But what crypto Twitter does is it kind of, especially for projects, it maximizes for almost like short-term narrative, short-term gain, this type of like very short-term thinking. And I think what a lot of the I guess individuals and companies coming out of Jump, what they had was this like relentless ability to execute over short, but mainly medium to long-term time horizons. Like anything that's going to be a meaningful step function improvement in like any product in crypto today is going to take time. And I think it's hard sometimes to, and especially in this industry, to put your blinders on and build something that you know the market needs, you know how it could have PMF, despite whatever the current narrative is. And I really think that the individuals coming out of Jumps kind of have that relentless focus. And I think, yes, they're smart. I think a lot of people can be smart, but I don't think a lot of people, can execute on that. I think there's a good saying I always think about. It's like there's a difference between a man with an idea and one who acts on an idea, right? You can be around a table talking about, this, that, and the other. That's a good idea, but it's, that's 1% actually of the work. 99% is, execute.
And that's 99% of crypto Twitter, basically. They all have ideas and very few can execute.
Yeah, it sounds so that vision plus execution and bringing on the talent is probably that secret sauce. And it probably also ties down to like Wormhole, I believe, started like 5 years ago with a strong conviction that the world would go multi-chain.
Yeah.
Whereas like the dominating thesis would be L1 focused, just one L1 to take on all the market. So I guess you had that vision and the sort of medium to long term ability to execute.
That's actually a great like reference point, right? Because at the time, fast forward back then, the current narrative was like, you are an idiot if you think there's going to be multiple chains. Then the narrative, and I've said this before, then the narrative was, you're an idiot if you think things are going to settle outside of Ethereum. It's like, yes, we'll need more chains, but they're all going to be L2s that settle to it. So for a very long time, the narratives we were kind of working or executing against were actually very much so counter. Just to kind of give examples to further this. And then finally, we're now in a state today where flipped entirely, where you're an idiot if you think there's only going to be one chain, not an idiot, but you know what I mean? And it's very much so different world now, which is great. And obviously has benefited us, but it took a lot of conviction to kind of build past a lot of that stuff. And there were times where we're like, I mean, do we have a business model if X, Y, and Z, if it doesn't pan out? And so it does take a certain amount of conviction and belief on like the research and things that you've done. You have a view of the world that you think is right.
So you had this conviction from the team just doing a whole lot of research to realize that the world was going multi-chain, and you just stuck to your guns there. Essentially, you stuck to your conviction.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of it was like conviction in Solana, right? In Wormhole, we are very much so chain agnostic. Obviously, we're here today to talk a lot about Fogo, which we're extremely excited about. But we had such a conviction in Solana and the thesis at the time, which now we know by heart and ad nauseum. But the thesis is like high throughput, fast and cheap. Yes, it's going to be a little bit more centralized, but like the conviction in that this is going to work also furthered our beliefs there, right? It was like Ethereum. We started by connecting Ethereum and Solana, but Solana just had such a strong use case to us. Obviously, Jump was very involved with Solana too early on, that we were like, the world is going to be multi-chain. There's no way that Solana's not going to have users, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a few things, but I also think Solana played a big role in that. And funny enough, to Dan's point, we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary, and we posted a video of Anatoly, who very early on kind of gave a demo of Wormhole, because it was exciting for Solana back then, because all Ethereum users could bring liquidity over, and that was important to bootstrapping such a young chain.
I remember it well. I was working for Phantom Wallet at the time, and we were eagerly waiting for Wormhole to be shipped so that everything could more and more fun on Solana. And as soon as it did. It got tremendously more fun on Solana back in the early days.
Yeah, there's a fun fact. We actually looked this up recently. I don't know what Solana's TVL. We can look this up quick on DeFi Llama, but at the time I looked this up, it was more than the TVL of Solana. But we have brought in, I think, close to 12 billion of inflows to Solana. Obviously, that money can flow in and out. It doesn't flow and stick, but over 12 billion. And if you think about this, like between cities, like exporting goods and whatnot. I think it's kind of a fun analogy. But yeah, we brought in, I think, just about 12 billion in value to Solana to help bootstrap that blockchain ecosystem.
That's incredible. We're definitely grateful that you exist.
And we're looking to replicate it with Fogo, right? That's the value, I think, for a lot of chains with Wormhole is obviously you can have users on board from centralized exchanges, but a lot of them are already on chain. And the more time passes, the more on chain users we have. And so they're already using other blockchains. And so you're going to, one of the things we're going to have day one is just a ton of inflows from other blockchains, including Solana, to Fogo. And that's, I think, a lot of what we're working on right now.
Exciting.
At the same time, like, you had that vision, but it also looks simplistic in a way that it's also, in retrospective, obvious, because you also make the comparison of like the Swift for crypto. So you make a parallel of what exists in TradFi, which the banking system.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think a year and a half ago, if you listen to a lot of crypto pods, went to panels, maybe even a little longer, crypto had a promise of like being everything, right? It was like a decentralized supercomputer. Everything that runs on your phone today is going to be run on these decentralized systems, blah, blah, blah. Look, I don't not believe that future. I believe, we're going to have some version of that. But what I think,
Bit premature.
what I think blockchain and crypto is really, really good for is an upgraded financials. And so if you take that into context, which we can get into why 24/7 markets, instant settlement, exporting of a more stable dollar, cross-border settlement, blah, blah, blah. You take that concept and you apply it to, like, you can apply a lot of it to the TradFi industry, right? Because we're just upgrading a lot of it. I don't think people say we're replacing. Sure, you could say replace. We could just argue over the word, but we're just upgrading, right? T2, T1, T0 in terms of time, like time to settlement. With Swift, right? Like being able to be this, omnipresent, chain agnostic system that you can settle money between, and it's like ubiquitous, all the chains. Like that is very much so the vision in terms of what Wormhole's going after. And I think it's a very good analogy. Obviously, there's some nuances always, but I think it helps explain to a lot of people, especially as we're coming up on the holiday season, your relatives at the holidays.
And you also have the ability to let a dApp and let users just focus on the user experience. They don't have to worry about the security, the complex issues of cross-chain messaging, which very few of us are going to ever understand. You can just integrate with Wormhole and just get access to that liquidity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think today a lot of people understand interoperability as sending assets between chains, which is great because that's like 90% of the use cases. That's what Fogo is going to benefit a ton from, right? It's just a bunch of assets flowing to the chain. What there's like an interesting ecosystem effect though, and that's what I would call core business, right? So you think about Amazon. Amazon's core business today is marketplace. It's a marketplace. We go on and buy goods. However, they said, what's worth more money and what's debatably more valuable is having the system that everything can be built on, like an ecosystem play. So that's like your AWS, if you will. So they now have like these, two very separate, but probably play into each other products more or less. For Wormhole, I think about it somewhat similarly, right? We have our core business, which is like bridging assets between chains, but the messaging aspect, to your point, Seb, also enables a lot of things that I don't think we talk about a lot. So a good example, and Dan brought this team up earlier, is Pyth. Pyth is an incredible innovation when it comes to oracles, right? Like ingesting these high quality price feeds from these financial institutions, bringing them on chain. But the problem they had was it costs a lot of money in terms of dev resources, time, audit costs to deploy across all these blockchains. So instead of saying, let's write contracts for all these blockchains, let's have engineers that know Move, that know SVN or Rust, that know all these different languages, taking all this time. Instead of doing all that, they said, we're just going to connect Wormhole to PythNet, which is where they do price feeds. And then all Wormhole is going to do is essentially like ferry price feeds to all these different chains, right? So in that context, Wormhole is like a business enabler, not just transporting assets, but transporting data to the point where Pyth now can grow their company way faster. And I think they have the most chains out of any Oracle in all of DeFi at this point. So I'm glad you brought that up because it doesn't get enough credit, right? There's the transferring assets, which most people use, but there's also the building of primitives on this thing that helps you scale across all chains.
I'm also glad that you brought that up, because in looking at all pieces of news, the sort of combination of Pyth and Wormhole did stand out, and I think it was quite a breakthrough moment when the U.S. Department of Commerce decided to started publishing information such as GDP data on chain. Like, curious, as you've seen this journey of crypto, like how much of a breakthrough moment was this for crypto?
So I think there's two steps to any like breakthrough moment. I think, and I apply this the same type of logic or thought process with tokenization as an example. The first step is like a formerly not interested in crypto institution like going through the motions to do the first that first thing, right? So like it could be BlackRock saying, you know what, we're going to take our money market fund and we're going to issue it on chain. Like that's a huge moment. That is a breakthrough moment in and of itself. But the second thing, but when that first happened, if we're being honest, BUIDL, which we're talking about, the BlackRock's money market fund, didn't have a ton of uses. It was like, okay, cool, this lives on chain. It's not we're not unlocking a lot of the potential here. Doesn't take away from the fact that that's a big milestone moment. The second one that we're now entering with BUIDL in particular is like, okay, this is a pretty like safe yielding asset or financial vehicle. Now let's use it in DeFi. Now let's unlock the next kind of promise of composability or permissionlessness, et cetera, and use it as collateral, maybe to mint a stablecoin, right? Athena, I think, offers this, or use it as collateral to take a long position or something, right? So you now kind of have this like composability and that kind of like more promise of DeFi. So it's kind of gone through these like two steps. The reason I bring that up is because I think the economic data is somewhat similar, right? It's like huge moment for the US government to say blockchains are important, mutability is important, we're going to start issuing this on chain. I think the next moment we're waiting for is like, okay, now how are we going to use this in DeFi? I actually thought a lot about the US government, not to get too into it, but just like governments in general bringing data on chain. And I think it's really interesting because, and this is a very meta thought, probably outside of what we should talk about today, but
No, those are more than welcome.
Okay. There's like this saying that's like history is written by the winners. And on a long enough time horizon throughout history, there's been things that have been altered, changed, et cetera, to maybe present a more rosy picture of whether it was the current government or, what current government decisions were made, et cetera. I think the higher level idea that I think is really symbolic here is that these governmental institutions can now be held accountable because they're put in and not, I guess, write whatever version of the future that or history that they want the future to know of, because they're putting it for the first time on what quite literally is an immutable system. It's not, yes, we have databases, but like those can be altered or changed or whatever the information is quite easily. Putting this information is like, it's just like the best way to hold governments accountable. And again, I'm not saying on a regular basis, the US government or anything is like changing GDP data, but I think we're all familiar that like these things happen over a long enough period of time in some sort of context. And so that symbolism that like you now have this immutable place where this information could be held, that idea of like history is always written by the winners, which you may view as kind of sad or not, it kind of erodes at that concept a little bit. And so I think that's like the meta, that part I'm really excited about. But to speak more specifically, like we're at the US government didn't like crypto a long time ago, as we all know, or not even a long time ago, a year and a half ago. Now they're open to it. Now the next step is like, what does it look like to be? So I'm waiting to get excited again for that. But I think no matter what, we should celebrate. This is a win.
This is a major win. Yeah, and you're right. History is written by the winners. I didn't really think of it like that, but time and time again, you do see this. And now you've got this situation where the data it's there, it's sitting there, it can be checked by anybody. And if the world goes a little bit crazy, you've got like something that you can verify as being a source of truth.
Yeah, and we should push for more of it to come on chain. I mean, everyone should want that, right? Like accountability is key. Accountability is a key in a company, right? You're like, hey, did you do this? Yes or no? Like we need accountability for the people running the places we all live. And so obviously my opinion on it is clear, so I'll shut up.
But yeah, like I think that phase 2 or step 1, which you called it, I think it is very impressive, because we're also talking about, okay, you mentioned BlackRock, Biddle, but you have Apollo, Van Eck, Centrifuge, like very fancy names, to be honest, to be associating with the DeFi space. But particularly for Wormhole, I think that stage 2 is really I really think a fund manager doesn't care about blockchain. They care about the assets, and suddenly like they want to be able to be exposed to DeFi as a whole. And the only way to do that is if everyone's plugged in, right?
Yes, you're entirely right. Like these people just want to be on chain, and I say this all often. Like you'll have talking heads or from various blockchains that obviously are backed by us. Nothing against them, it's just the truth. I'm the same with Wormhole, so we just put it out there, right? Like, and they will say, the world is coming on my chain, or on chain, and they'll be talking about their chain. I think it's very important for us to grow to a state where when we talk about on-chain, we mean all of them, or at least like some metric, 95% of all on-chain activity, which is probably like the top 15 chains. There's hundreds of chains, but like it's probably the top 15.
Fogo number 1, hopefully.
Fogo number, yeah. I hope. I think will know what chain they're working on. I think some people talk about like removing the concept of a chain. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think there's certain things people will have to learn. Just like when the internet came out, we all had to learn what a URL was, what www was. But like you will learn those these various things that may not get completely abstracted away, like some people think, which may be kind of a hot take. I think the UX abstraction argument is like everything is going to be like abstracted away. I believe that to an extent, but I think the little things here and there, ultimately, like people will learn over time. Again, just like a URL, that concept is probably, if you think back, is crazy. Like we just grew up kind of knowing what it was, but back to learning what that was, you're like, why do I have to know this thing? So I think a fund manager is just like, they may know what Solana is, Fogo is, all these chains, but they just expect their assets to be able to be used across all of them and across all these DeFi protocols, which is the right expectation to have. And so that's the conversations we have with them all the time of like, and why we've been able to kind of corner that market is one, security, but other is distribution. Like, yeah, you issue Biddle on this chain, you'll be able to use it on Morpho and Polygon. That's fine. You can transfer it over there.
Fund managers can they can go and chase wherever the yield is best and just move very, very quickly their funds around.
Yep. And that's all they want to do. They just want yield.
Yield.
For their customers.
Sexy yield. On the subject of URLs, I remember when I was a kid, my aunt had an issue sending emails. She went to the equivalent of an Apple store back then, and she had like one letter wrong. She's like, "Oh, what? It can't find it? Why can't it find it? If someone gets one letter wrong in my postal address, it can't." So yeah, it does take a little bit of time for that learning curve to happen, and I think it's going to be quite some time before it's all abstracted away. All the difficulty is probably going to be a few more years where the fund managers are going to have to know the ins and outs of different blockchains and whatnot.
And like I said, there's going to be things, I think this is not talked about enough. There's going to be things that we have to, like people just have to learn. What those things are, I don't 100% know. My hunch is that people will still have to know maybe relatively what blockchain they're on, right? Maybe. But like a wallet, we will get as close as possible, but there'll be nuances that along the way people will just, net new things that we have to learn. Just like I'm looking at my computer right now and the concept of a browser and tabs, like those weren't in our language 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that, 25.
But at the same time, you are starting to really improve the UX.
Absolutely.
So recently you've just announced portal swap, any chain, any token, so users now, they don't have to worry about executing cross-chain or same-chain transfers. They just simply access the tokens they need and just finds the most efficient route available.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm kind of talking against myself a little bit. I try to be intellectually honest. I do think, however, we will solve a lot of the rough edges, right, when it comes to any sort of UX. And I think that interoperability protocols in particular are the most critical when it comes to UX. I would say like at the wallet aggregator level, like Privy, obviously very important too. But I think interop plays that very, very important role. And to your point, Seb, we just launched same chain swaps, right? So we are an ecosystem, meaning like anyone can build on Wormhole different products, like we talked about Pyth, and World Chain has World ID, but we do have a flagship product that's Portal. Portal, our goal is for it to be the portal to DeFi. You go to Portal, you can do anything you need or get anywhere into any asset that you need to, right? So For the longest time, our main product has just been bridging, right? Transferring assets between chains. Now you can go to Portal, and we've extended to just swapping same chain, right? So getting into any asset on any chain should now be possible in Portal. And we have a bunch more planned coming as soon as before the end of this year in terms of more DeFi functionality on.
While talking about bridging, this might be a good segue to talk about native token transfers. Dan did a bit more research into this, so I'll let Dan kind of ask the right questions here.
Yeah, just perhaps just one technical question just to understand, because like it sounds like this NTT native token transfers is like an innovation in terms of like safety, for instance. Like, can you briefly explain what it does?
NTT is the end game for assets being able to seamlessly live across any chain. But I think the best way to describe NTT is to start with a little bit of the history of asset transfer. History is with asset transfer, as you can imagine, started when there were multiple chains, which is about 5 years ago when Wormhole kind of got involved with Ethereum and Solana. At the time, the way to get an asset between chain A and chain B was effectively you had the validators, a way to essentially say what is true of the system, of the protocol. You would lock funds on chain A. You'd have validators essentially be like, all right, those funds are locked. Let chain B know that you can mint them. And the validators would also own those contracts. So you'd have a set of contracts across each, and you would have what's called a lock-in system. That caused a few issues. Number one, lock and mint got kind of the bad taste got in people's mouth, because what happens is it's like a custody contract. You're locking a lot of funds in, which is super juicy for any sort of hacker. They want to get at that contract. And then the second was there was no flexibility in ownership of the contract. So if I'm issuing the stablecoin and then using a bridge, I'm kind of like giving ownership of my stablecoin to the bridge on that new chain. So like, let's say it's, FUSD on this chain. Now it's FUSD on this other chain, but I don't actually own those contracts. So it's kind of like this almost like fake bridged version. What happened was a lot of bridges came along and would create multiple versions of a stablecoin on each chain. So we saw this with USDC originally. There's actually some kind of like famous in my world, but pictures of like wallets, and you guys may have experienced this. There's like 5 different USDCs, 5 different USDTs. So you had this like twofold problem. Number one is the lock and mint system isn't looked at the best from a security perspective. Number two, there's no ability to transfer ownership. So like you can't have an official version. You have all these fake versions that people try to compete with, which is sometimes there's downsides in permissionless side of things, right? And that's one of them. And so now what has happened is we've developed this framework based on all these problems across about 3 years, talked to a lot of our biggest asset issuers, and we developed a super flexible framework. The main difference is you have the same security guarantees, but the actual contracts themselves can be completely taken over. They don't have to be owned by the validators, can be completely taken over by the asset issuer. So the asset issuer can now just deploy all like a liquidity on one chain and then burn and mint instead of lock and mint. So solving that other problem across all these different chains. So what happens there is you have a native version across all chains from the start, and it is owned by the stablecoin or asset issuer, whoever it is, instead of the actual protocol itself. So we're solving the 2 original problems that cause the liquidity fragmentation and security issues. One is lock and mint, and 2 is they're able to own the contract so multiple don't get created. And it actually has really cool second, third order consequences, meaning like, let's use Fogo, for instance. You're going to have one stablecoin or 2 stablecoins that are different, but not the same one that's different, if that makes sense. And that all the protocols on Fogo can build deep liquidity for. They don't have to decide. Let's say the DEX wanted this stablecoin flavor and the perp DEX wanted this stablecoin flavor and the money market wanted this one. All of a sudden you have a super disjointed ecosystem. And so it's actually a really big innovation that I don't think a lot of people fully grok, because you don't feel the difference until you're using like a net new protocols on net new chain that's implemented them. That was probably a lot of info there, but I think it's important to know the history. But to me, it's the end game. And asset issuers so far love it. I mean, we just crossed 100 NTT deployments, and the product has been live for a little less, I think, or about a year. about a year now.
What are some of the tokens that are available with NTT? Obviously, like USDC would be one, right?
USDC is unique. It's probably the most unique stablecoin in the sense that they have their own centralized bridge that we've built alongside of. So I wouldn't say it's actually quite using the NTT tech as it is today. They still use Wormhole. It's just Wormhole messaging, not NTT particular. Some examples I think of NTT are AUSD, which is Agora, M0, which is a stablecoin product, uses NTT. USDS, which is DAI rebranded. Most people know that by now, but just for context, uses NTT. There's a ton of network tokens like Wrapstake ETH uses NTT. Solana uses NTT for Solon AVAX as an example. Polygon Pole uses NTT. I mean, the list is really long. I'm just naming some of the bigger ones, but like it's definitely the preferred way because it gives you complete optionality. Like if you want the protocol to own the token, you can still choose that. Which I think is what some people do that, not a lot of people. And the protocol, meaning the Guardians, Wormhole's like secure validator network, but most people want to choose to own it themselves, or entities want to own it. But yeah, those are some examples of NTT assets.
In 2021, I think I made a tutorial on Wormhole, and I had to chat with the Wormhole team in order to work out everything. And this was exactly the issue I had. You'd go onto one blockchain, and there wouldn't be like liquidity for a stablecoin, or there'd be different types, or you'd bridge across the wrong one from Solana to another network, and it was a wrong one. You had to reverse it. So I can see exactly why this is here. This is really good news.
I actually love that you brought that up, Seb, because I can't tell you how long I've spent as glorified customer support solving non-liquid route issues. And you're right that one of the core reasons for non-liquid routes is these like legacy wrapped tokens that are owned by the bridge and not by the issuer. And so it was just a fundamental problem that sprung up from the permissionlessness of this stuff. And so I'd get messages like, I got this token on this chain and there's no liquidity. What do I do with it? And I'm like, it's permissionless. Yeah, you bridge it back and swap into something else. So we've come a long way, but I love that you've experienced some.
And I also wonder, as a little bit of an anecdote, in 2018, so I got into crypto in 2017. In 2018, I realized I had all these different types of USD coins, like USDC and USDT, and maybe one or two other ones. And that alone was also a confusing aspect to me just immediately. I was like, why do I have this and not this one? Aren't they all the same? Isn't just US dollars? And I have no idea if the new people coming into crypto have this issue as well, but it's going to make it far harder if we still had this, this initial system which worked as well as it needed to as an MVP. But if we had the system where, you did have like, I think there was AnySwap USDC and there was USDC set and USDC portal. And I do remember seeing about 4 or 5 different types in my wallets.
So that will be solved by abstraction combined with NTT. But like, imagine you're on Polymarket. Polymarket only accepts, they probably have changed this, but from a USDC perspective, this is as a couple months ago. I'm not entirely sure if it's still the case. They only accepted USDC on Polygon. But now it's pretty easy to set up a system where you can say, I really only want as a business USDC on Polygon, but accept deposits in any USDT, USDC, USDS, whatever it is. And Wormhole can route that swap, that cross-chain swap in the background to settle Polymarket in USDC on Polygon, right? So that will be solved. There's still going to be different flavors you have to contend with, but you can easily come to an application with whatever you have, and they can accept and get whatever they want.
So it sounds like timing is great that we have these innovations, abstraction, NTT, because perhaps we're not that far from the Fogo mainnet. We're not absolutely sure when that will be, but it should be Q4. So perhaps we've seen that you and Dan Reeser are both contributors to Fogo.
Yeah.
And perhaps I'll give some context for those who aren't aware. So Fogo is a high-performance layer 1 built on the Solana virtual machine. And the goal is to bring institutional-grade finance on-chain, essentially a hyper-liquid top competitor. And I was wondering, when did you first hear about Fogo, and why did you decide to become a contributor?
Yeah, I mean, I first heard about Fogo. I don't even know. I had to be one of the earlier people to hear hear about it from Rob. Rob obviously had his brainchild, if you will. And you know what? The idea almost immediately stuck with me, right? We see a lot of chain launches. We see a lot of chain ideas being one of the main infrastructure they need to connect with day one. Like we see it all really early. And it made a lot of sense to me, right? It's very purpose built. I'm a big believer in high throughput chains, as you can see by our background and where we've kind of focused a lot of efforts. Solana, Sui, Monad as well, but Fogo to me is and was that as well. And when got approached with the idea of Fogo and to kind of contribute more and make sure obviously Wormhole was in a good place to provide the best experience for applications and users, it was a no-brainer. And I think the idea that was had back then, which is exciting to see, has only been further validated, right? One of the biggest use cases right now are high throughput, specifically like perps chains, perps dexes, and that exist on high throughput chains. And I just think Fogo's in a really good position to capture a lot of that and provide a really good experience for traders and also institutional traders, which I think is really exciting. Hyperliquid does a fantastic job, and Rob will say this himself. And I think they capture a lot of like retail and probably a lot of institutional flow too. But I'm excited because I think Fogo can really differentiate from a speed perspective and then also capturing more institutional attention. It was a no-brainer since the beginning, and it's actually just really exciting that now everything's finally coming to fruition. So I'm really looking forward to day one.
Q4, we're excited. We're excited.
Can't come soon enough. No, we're in the trenches right now, which is like one of my favorite parts. It's making sure everything's. A lot of people don't realize, I think, what goes into a blockchain launch. They just see what's on Twitter, but they don't really see the many years or a couple years. And Fogo's to Fogo's praise, they were able to do things incredibly fast. So year, 2 years, whatever, they don't see all that work. And so we're right now putting the final touches on everything to make sure day one is as much of a success as it can be. But with everything, sometimes the initial launch, there may be, and I don't know this happens with Fogo, but we've helped launch 40 plus chains at this point. There's hiccups here and there, but a good team always sorts them out and make sure that the feedback's taken, iterated on, and that's the best path to success.
And 40 plus chains is a lot to back that. It'll probably work out. And like thinking of the end user, like how and when will people be able to like bridge assets in and out of Fogo?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be there day one. So we're going to be there day one. When we launch, you'll be able to bridge in any of the. There'll be a few assets that I think will be the most important. You're probably not going to want to bridge your random like base meme coin or something into Fogo, but you'll be able to bridge in your USDC, your USDT, your version of Bitcoin, your wrapped Ethereum, your Solana, your any of the majors, any of the stable coins. Portalbridge.com will have it day one. Mayan.finance will have it day one. So we'll make sure that you can get any asset over. And then we're working closely with the applications, obviously building on Fogo. I mean, there's a bunch, Valiant, Ambient, Fluxbeam, et cetera, working closely with them to make sure that they're set up so that these assets can seamlessly flow in. But that's definitely our goal, is to be we will be day one, and you will be able to transfer.
Well, we'll make sure we have a tutorial ready to go, because there's always a little bit of a UX, although this UX with Portal Bridges and Mayan, it's pretty good. I've worked it out for Hyperliquid and it was very challenging, to be perfectly honest. But the flow already with Portal Bridge is good. But we'll make sure we've got a tutorial because, I want some fun. I want to bridge some funds in straight away.
Good to hear. And yeah, look, that's good feedback on Hyperliquid. I think Hyperliquid's interesting. You have Hyper EVM, you have Arbitrum. Like they definitely are spread across a few. But I think we're going to do a lot to make sure, whether it's gas optimization, so you get dropped off with gas, so you can then execute another trade or another action. Like there's a lot we're doing to make sure the UX day one is as possible. And the team's really focused on Fogo in particular when it comes to launches. So I have a lot of faith it's going to be good.
Okay, so we'll make sure we'll share some links to Portal, to Mayan, because we want to make sure everyone is on board, and we'll be trying it out. And we're probably like nearing the end soon, but if you allow me just to read, recently you reposted Robert Sagg's tweet, and it sort of had the idea of triple force, Fogo powered by Wormhole, and 00, suggesting that a bunch of coloed, purpose-built chains bridged via Wormhole is the real end state. Yeah, do you want to elaborate on that or add anything else? Because that sounds super cool.
Yeah, look, I think there is this higher level idea that there are app chain networks that never really worked that well, or never really. You could measure success in a number of different ways. If you measure Polkadot's success by their token, it's top 50, you could successful. But like from an activity of an ecosystem perspective, maybe Polkadot's not where people had imagined it'd be. One of the original app chains. Cosmos, very similar, right? Like no shade to either of these networks. We were close with them. I think that there's a lot of like successful builders within this ecosystem. Chains are successful within them. But I think as a whole, I think we've kind of moved on from these like app chain networks, more or less, right? And now all of these other, like Ethereum's trying to do this on their own with L2s. That's kind of an app chain ecosystem, right? L2s, L1. And a lot of the problems they have is actually interoperability and making sure that assets are fungible across all these different chains. And I think Ethereum solved one of the interesting problems, which was you don't have to bootstrap your own validator set, right? I think a lot of Cosmos teams, that was maybe difficult for them, kind of bring your own security. The thing is they sacrificed the centralization aspect, right? So now you have these sequencers powering these L2s. So they didn't like quite solve the problem fully, in maybe in my opinion. And so I think what this is alluding to is like there's a potential idea here where you can have, enshrined interoperability that is for more or less decentralized by today's standards. That's extremely fast out of the box. You focus primarily on high throughput chains. You're able to achieve better and faster speed because you're running on 00. And you have almost like a new version that's learned a lot of the mistakes of the past, a new version of an app chain network. And I think that idea is beautiful. If, who's to say it doesn't get executed on at some point, but I think that idea is really interesting. And I think it has a lot of merit, but right now we're focused on Fogo and mainnet launch. And, maybe we can talk about that on another pod in the future.
Sounds good. Fogo for now, and then on to the next part of the future in the future.
Cool. So we can leave you maybe with a final question if we're talking about the future. Next year, 2026, who will be in the top 3 of your assets bridged in terms of blockchain? What are your bets?
Blockchains.
So like the amount of inflow that goes into the
yeah. I would say outflow is a lot of it. Outflows of Ethereum. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say Ethereum, although Solana replaced them. I'd say inflows, Monad, Fogo, and Solana. I would say BNB is close behind. And I would say Ethereum's always close behind. They're just big. They just have a lot of liquidity. But I would say my prediction / my hope is Solana, Monad, Fogo. So let's see how likely that is. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I do think that if Fogo can do what Hyperliquid is doing plus some, or even just what Hyperliquid's doing. Obviously, Monad has been long awaited. We're the native bridge there, and then Solana we're the native bridge for, and they just can increasingly kind of have an upward trajectory more or less. I think those 3 can easily be in the top inflows of chains. BNB we're seeing more activity for, so I think that could continue to rise and be maybe a close contender. And then, like I said, Ethereum is just always in the mix, just given the kind of Lindy effect it has.
Good predictions. Certainly ones to watch. Well, thank you so much for your time, Robinson. We appreciate you sharing the Wormhole vision with us. We look forward to our next chat.
Thanks for having me, guys. Let's get Fogo launched.
Let's do it. Thank you, Robinson.